Hey there, superstar. In this video, I'm going to address how to say no without feeling guilty. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it can be so hard to say no, especially when you're somebody like you and me, most likely, who loves to say yes and help people and do favors for people. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to reframe saying no, a kind of a complete perspective shift. And then I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do to say no more effectively, more often. All right, here we go. Now, first I'll dive into the problem a little bit. Why is it so hard to say no? Why do we find ourselves so often saying yes when we really mean no? And then ultimately, I don't know about you, but for me and for a lot of my clients, finding ourselves resentful afterwards, right? We wish we could say no, we don't quite know how, so we say yes instead, and then we find ourselves like, oh, why did I say yes to this? Why did I volunteer for this? Why did I say I would do this, And ultimately, when we fill our lives with saying yes when we really mean no, if we don't have a strong practice of being able to hold our boundaries and say no, we can end up filling our lives and then living our lives for everybody else's priorities except ours, which is a recipe for a breakdown. And I know this from personal experience. I found myself filling up my life with yeses for my parents, for my business partner, for my clients, for my friends. And ultimately, I ended up exhausted, burnt out, resentful, and angry at other people and ultimately also at myself. So the reframe I want to share with you before we dive into the practices, the reframe is, what if you remembered that every single time you are saying yes to something, it means that you are saying no to something for yourself. Every time you agree to do something for someone, I'll use the example because I think it'll resonate with you. And I used to work from home 15 years ago when I started my business. My parents would often come and stay with me. We co-owned my apartment in Miami together. And so they felt like they could come and stay however long they wanted, whenever they wanted. And of course, I didn't really feel like I had any say about that. That's a whole nother story for another day. But the point is, because I was a brandly new minted entrepreneur, my parents would see me working from home all day. Unlike my brother who didn't live with us, but he would go to the office every morning, he would work all day, and then he would come home. I was home all day working. And because of that, my parents had this thing where they would just interrupt me at all times and ask me to do favors for them. For example, my dad would say, hey, Michelle, I need you to fax this for me. And of course, it was never like, you need this to fax this later. It's always urgent. It was always right now. It has to happen right now. So I would have to drop everything and do it. And it got to the point where I was just so frustrated and angry simply because I didn't know how to say, hey, Papi, I can do it later. I can get to it at this time. Or, Dad, I can't do that today. I'm too busy. Or whatever solution or whatever excuse that I could give. I never tried doing that. It was always like, yes, only yes. This created massive resentment for me. I would get resentful when I knew my parents were coming to visit. I would start to dread their arrival because I knew that it was going to interrupt my process. And I was blaming them for it instead of taking the responsibility back on myself and saying, I have a responsibility to create my boundaries, to close the office door, to do whatever I need to do to create the space for me. And so what I needed to figure out, which I wish I learned earlier, was that every time I was getting interrupted, that I was saying yes to something, not because I wanted to, but because I felt I should or I had to, that I was saying no to my own work, to my own self-care, to my own well-being. And so that's the shift I want you to make, that essentially every time you say yes, what is it that you're giving up? What of your time? Is it your workouts? Is it your sleep? Are you going to have to wake up earlier? Are you going to take an extra 45 minutes on the road to pick somebody up, right? And I'm not saying we don't do those things. I'm saying that first and foremost, you make sure that you're getting your needs met, that you're filling up your cup before you say yes to all these things outside of you. And if you remember the context that every time you say yes to something out here, what is it that you're saying no to in here first? All right, so that's the context shift. Now I'm going to dive into the 3 things that you can do. And before I do that, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and I'd love to hear your comments below about your saying no. All right, here we go. The first thing that needs to happen in order to start creating better boundaries and saying no is to really understand what you are saying yes to for yourself first. Like, what is it that matters? When you are clear about what you're up to, when you're clear about your daily goals, your weekly intentions, your big picture mission, when those things are clear, it becomes a lot easier to see what fits and what doesn't fit. So one of the things that gets in the way of having a good practice for protecting your time, your energy, your boundaries, is to be really clear about what you're up to at any given moment, is to have intentionality and focus. Now, there are lots of ways to do that. This video is kind of outside of the scope to dive super deeply into that, but I have other videos about identifying your mission, creating a plan of action, all the things that you need to do for your business to stay focused and present. I have tons of videos about them, and I highly recommend going and checking some of them out. But the first thing is, when you are clear about what you're doing, what you're up to, what you're saying yes to for you, it's a lot easier to start identifying what's not in alignment with that. The second thing I want you to look at is to examine your beliefs. This one goes a little deeper, right? Examining your beliefs looks like, what does it mean to you to say no? What does it mean to you to say yes? So I'll give you an example from my own experience, which is that I had a belief that saying no meant I was being mean or bad, or that it would make other people upset or angry. And because I highly valued the opinions and the approval of others, like my parents, for example, I would say yes in order to meet that need for approval above and beyond my actual need for completion of my goals and intentions. So step one was, the first thing I said was get clear about what you're up to. But number two, looking at your beliefs is going to help you identify that tug of war that happens when you've got something that you're up to and somebody asks you to do something, a favor or whatever, that's out of alignment with where your focus and energy need to go. Looking at what is that thing that's tugging for attention. Is it wanting to be the good girl? Is it seeking approval? Is it fear of other people's anger, right? That was a big one for me. I had oriented a whole lot of my life without realizing it around avoiding upsetting people, meaning that at a deep level, from a belief perspective, right, because we're examining beliefs, I was believing that I was responsible for other people's mood, for how other people were doing. Like, if I said no, then I would upset somebody. I was basically taking on their upset as my responsibility, right? So I had to, from a belief perspective, I had to start to tease apart what's mine and what's yours. What's my responsibility? Is it my responsibility for you to be happy, for you to get where you need to go? And I'm not saying that I don't help people. I do. I just say, is this in alignment with what I'm creating? Do I have the space, the energy, the bandwidth to say yes to this? And am I clear about what am I saying no to instead? And am I operating from some sort of fear or some sort of approval-seeking behavior, right? So I'm inviting you to those same questions, examining your beliefs. Are you trying to be the good girl, seek approval, etc.? Another thing I want you to examine in this second bucket is, can you hold a no and love at the same time? Now, that might seem like a really weird question, but I'll tell you that when I started examining this, I realized that I thought yes equaled loving and no equaled not loving. Like, I basically thought I had collapsed the concepts of yes and love. In other words, if I love you, I'll say yes to you, no matter what it is. And so teasing those things apart and understanding that I can love somebody and I can hold somebody with love and I can still say no to a request. And then the third thing to do is to practice saying no. I took on at one point an experiment of practicing saying no and having my default answer to requests for favors to be no. Now, that might sound, weird, and maybe it was a little weird, but I found that I had to work the muscle, right, of saying no. And in order to do that, I had to say, all right, for the next, I don't remember how long it was. I did this for maybe a week or so. Basically, for the next week, my default response is to pause and to decline whatever the offer was. Like whether, and I didn't mean I was declining everything. I wasn't declining, hey, let's go to dinner if I wanted to go to dinner. But if it was something that I felt like there was a resistance in me, then my default was going to be to practice saying no. And to saying no, holding love at the same time. This is a practice I also have been working on with my mentor, Nani Leah, who I've told you all about many times, practicing saying no thank you. Just no thank you with a smile, with love, instead of no having to be this like, no, I can't do it, or no, I won't, but just like, no thank you. No, I'm not able to do that. And also practicing not having to give an excuse, right? Just no, just like because I said so, because it's my sovereign right to be able to decline this offering, however wonderful and loving or whatever it might seem. So practice. So the first thing is be clear about your own intentions, what you're up to. Number 2 is to look at those beliefs and kind of tease them apart. And number 3 is practice. Just practice saying no thank you and declining. Hope that you found this video helpful. If you'd like to work with somebody like me to mentor you on how to build and grow your coaching practice and develop yourself in the process, check out my Superstar Business Breakthrough program. You can look at that at superstarbusinessbreakthrough.com.